Welcome to the Conversations with Reinforced Engineers podcast, India's first podcast for and by civil engineers. Join us on our journey to simplify and bring you experiences straight from the industry. This is your host E.S. Krishnara along with co-host Padmadeep Joshi and Gogulji Kumar. So let's jump right into it.
Welcome guys back to yet another episode of Conversations with Reinforced Engineers. Hope you found the previous episode on investing interesting and was helpful to you. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to our podcast on any of the platform that you are hearing us on. So, coming to today's episode, you might have already seen the title. It is about disaster management. Padmadeep had already conducted a LinkedIn poll where he asked our audience about what the next episode should be on. And about 22 people out of the 55 votes that were casted asked for a topic disaster management. Though it was not the first option, we decided to take up this topic on disaster management currently because of the current scenario around the world. There are multiple examples of disasters, both man-made and natural, around the world that are happening currently, and we feel that this is the apt time to discuss this topic. So PD, what were your thoughts when we are taking up this topic on disaster management? And why do you think that this is the apt time to discuss something like this?
Krishna, so when we talk about disaster management, there are 3 to 4 different aspects. One is the response for the disaster, one is the preparedness for the disaster, and one is how you cope up with the disaster. So, if I talk about myself, in 2001 we have experienced earthquake in Gujarat. So that was a very shaking experience for me. You experienced Kerala floods, and recently you also experienced a crest. That is a man-made event as disaster goes on. So we have been surrounded by the disasters, either it can be natural or man-made, but somehow we are still relying with the back data. We are still relying with the event to occur and then look for the solutions. So my intention was to understand how, as a professional, how as a project management professional or construction management professional, we can have a second look on some of the aspects and work on a positive note. So if you have to talk about a few of the examples, we have heard of the diseases which have been very badly affected to humankind and even to the environment, like Ebola, Zika virus, even the dengue flu initially, and forest fires are also one aspect of the disaster as well. You might have heard of the recent oil spill in Mauritius. That is massive and that is very deadly for the oceanic life and even for the very small country who is relying on the tourism. So if we see around our world, the climate change is real, but still we are using polythenes in our daily life. So why we can't be prepared from an individual point of view and not only from the government political aspects? So that was the overall agenda for today's discussion, and we are very concerned with what is happening around the world. We are totally shocked with what happened with the Kerala recent accident, the air crash. So some of the major concerns we currently see is Assam has been flooded every year. We still don't have answer for that. Even the landslides in northern states, or you take example of Kerala. Recently, they are facing major issues there. The landslides, the flood they have been experienced in the last year, even this year, and the man-made incident which has shook the entire world. That is the plane crash. That is very which someone cannot process very easily.
So, PD, coming back to one of the statements you just made, because I guess when speaking about disaster management, that holds very true. You just mentioned that we take it on a case by case basis, because it is true that people are not expecting something to happen, but they'll
Hmm.
be in a flight or fight response when it happens, right? So Kerala, we had the first major flood in say past 100 years back in 2018. In 2019 also we had experienced something uh, not that drastic as far as 2018 was concerned, but on a similar line. In 2020 also, I guess we'll be having some sort of flooding, and even see some part of Kerala, in the middle of Kerala and northern part of Kerala, is already experiencing floods at some level. But the thing is that we were not prepared. Like, we know that okay, if it is going to rain on a higher than average case, we might experience flood, but still we were not prepared. I guess this is holding true for other scenarios as well. Why is that happening?
See, somewhere if you see, when you talk about disaster management, it is about strategical planning and to define the procedure to fight such natural or man-made events, right? But when we are like drafting this current scenarios, we are not taking anything which is out of the human control. Something like floods. See, uh, you cannot control some of the aspects which has been taking place in a very massive scale, like floods, or you talk about massive forest fires. That cannot be controlled. But there has to be some measures which we as a humans can take care of. Like at the time of forest fire, we can at least try to locate the wildlife in the forest with help of geotags, or we can at least have a backup plan to evacuate them from the place. So I think we should always have a plan with us, and we should not always surrender to the global countries, like what Mauritius is trying to do currently, like dropping their weapons and raising the alarm that we are helpless. That doesn't make any sense. I think they were aware that there is a vessel in the periphery, so there has to be some preparedness if something like happens. I personally feel like that. What is your thoughts, Gokul?
True, PD. What you have said is absolutely correct because we can't blame nature every time any natural calamity occurs. As a human being, we are also a part of that. The Kerala flood, you have said rightly that it has happened due to some natural reasons. But I believe that there are also some of the major reasons, man made reasons behind that. As Krishna told, that Kerala floods was really unpredictable because this much of rainfall in a quick succession, which was not at all predicted by even the government or any other intelligent agency. But it came. We witnessed that. So, why it happened? There are several reasons for that. So, some of them are, I would say, there was a dam mismanagement because people or the government of Kerala was never expecting this unpredictable rainfall for this year 2018. So what happened was the dams were full and they were expecting rains in August, but they were not expecting this much of rainfall. So they never thought of emptying or keeping a buffer for this water to come. So there was no buffer for water to enter. As a result, two-thirds of the dams in Kerala they were opened at that time. It was the first time when this happened in Kerala. So it was really alarming even for the government and the people all over the state. So this was one of the reason I would say because when a state which is having 53 large dams and when it's two-thirds of the dams are getting opened, so you can understand the situation. What would have happened with the people or what the government faced at that time. And the other reason I would feel is there was a Gadgil report in 2011. Gadgil is an ecologist and he is a famous professor. He gave a report on Western Ghats. And most of the governments in the states of Western Ghats, they ignored it. In that, he has correctly mentioned, he classified the zones as ecologically sensitive zones. And in that also, he classified it as ecological sensitive zone 1, 2, and 3. So in the zone 1, he said that it is highly sensitive. There should be no dams constructed in this zone. There should be no mining activities. And he even said that it should be a no-go area, means no one should go there and it should be specially protected because there exists special habitats, geological foundations, different biodiversity in that area. So this report, which stated Western Ghat as a highly sensitive area, then also majority of the government they ignored it and some construction activities. I'm not seeing a lot of constructions are happening in hilly area, but whatever is happening, it's not well planned. These are all natural beauties what we have got. So if we'll not take care of this natural beauty in that way, we are definitely going to get setbacks. So the thing is we should keep the balance of the nature. There should be economical as well as ecological balance in the nature.
Gokul, I think you unintentionally mentioned about the environmental balance and the ecological thing. Krishna, we have also seen a recent article on EIF from you. So can you link some of the aspects over here?
True, actually, even I was planning to interlink the both at some time in the discussion because, see, ultimately, both have a very positive correlation, right? Because, see, if you are not doing proper research as to where you should be conducting or where you should be building a dam or a road project or any kind of project, main issue is that Kerala, on one side we have this Western Ghats, and that takes a huge area of Kerala, right? It is not something like we can avoid hilly regions entirely. And there are risks. See, EIA is mostly for, say, big projects. But say if you're planning to construct a home or a house at the base of a hill, you have to have some kind of a, say, permission or a clearance that says that, okay, this house is not constructed on a landslide prone area. Because I guess 3 or 4 days back, we had a huge landslide, I guess one of the biggest in Kerala's history. And the death toll is somewhere around 45 to 50. And the reason is that there were human settlements in a landslide prone area, right? So even
True,
for
true.
residential projects, there has to be some kind of clearances that ensure that such dwellings are not coming up in very sensitive areas.
So one very interesting thing highlighted by Gokul, which he mentioned previously, is Kerala has more than 53 reservoirs, right? That is correct, Gokul?
Yes, 53 large dams are there.
Okay. But when you talk about the drainage system or the waterway in the city areas, I'm trying to correlate with the engineering aspect now. We still have this tendency to go with the optimized design, right? So if I talk of Gujarat scenario, basically from my city, Rajkot, when you see the drainage lines, even with a very small range, the lines get choked up. The entire lines get choked up. Maybe it is because of the lack of maintenance before the monsoon, like we call it a pre-monsoon activities, or maybe because they are not designed to cater the current requirements. So, like suppose say the required flow is of 6 mld and the design is done with a slope of 2 mld. It doesn't make any sense. It cannot like accommodate the flow of water which you are gonna get with the rains. So I think it is one of the failure as well over there. So it's not always about the natural calamities, but somewhere even the engineering has failed to address these aspects.
See, PD, coming to the case of Kerala, see how the situation is that we have Western Ghats on one side and we have Arabian Sea on one side, right? See, what used to happen was that when it rains very extensively, we used to get pretty good amount of rain in the Western Ghats. And the natural topography is such that the Western Ghats are obviously at a higher altitude. The water used to flow from the hilly area down through the populated area and then on to the Arabian Sea ultimately. See, we have 44 rivers in such a narrow strip of land, and 41 of them are flowing from the Ghats to the sea, right? But what happened is that, see, we Kerala are a very, what do you say, there is huge scarcity for land, and especially it is very natural for civilizations to grow up around the banks of rivers, right? So that is what happened to us also. We developed hugely around the banks of such rivers, and what happens when it rains, these rivers tend to overflow. So dwellings around the banks of these river are the most affected, right? So there was need for some kind of planning as to allowing buildings or even residential buildings to come up in the banks of both the sides of the river. And to add to the problem, as already mentioned by Google, what happens is that our dams are getting filled at a fast rate. So there is a requirement to open these dams. So that is bringing in additional water to these rivers, right? So the issue is that the most affected are those on the banks of these rivers. So PD, I know that you are much into this urban landscape or to design the urban sprawl. So how do you think we should have tackled this situation?
See, it's a very complicated thing actually. When you talk about like states with heavy rainfalls every year, the design is not the aspect. The aspect is how you handle the water resource. So if you talk about one disaster response from my side, I would say linking your water resources with the other states. That's the most what you call optimal solution you can think about. Because see, there is constant flow of water at your end, like in the Kerala. Every year you're experiencing floods or some sort of uh, like heavy rainfall, right? So even India was planning to link their major water resource with the other states. Like currently, we are sharing Narmada with three different states: Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. In some of the cities and some of the villages. So if that is happening throughout India, if we are able to get the pipeline which can supply water to other states, uh, which still have requirement, to the nearby state like Tamil Nadu, that would be like efficient way to deal with the problem. But to enhance the capacity, it doesn't make any sense for the states like Kerala, because you already have like 53 reserves. That's a huge number. So that means there is a water and there is a plenty amount of rainfall. But I think this is one of the things you can look for.
PDA agree with you, but the drainage infrastructure of a city is also an important factor. So, in most of the cities in Kerala or in our country, if there is even a low rainfall, the drainage system gets choked. So, as a result, the road get flooded up with water. My point of view is we should give a lot more importance to the effective drainage system for a city.
Yeah, that is very correct, Gokul. That is what I was trying to highlight in the first place as well. So I think drainage is not only the issue for the Kerala, it is the issue for the entire nation, I would
Yes,
say,
yes.
because we are still looking for the optimized design, and when you look for the optimized design, you have to like give some
Cut
opportunity cost
edges.
for the other
Yeah.
aspects. I think that's why Assam is still suffering with the heavy rains. I don't
PD,
think
I
we
would,
still,
PD,
yeah.
I'm having a doubt at this stage. See, when you're building drainage infrastructure and stuff like that, are you building for the optimized case or are you building it for the worst case scenario?
See, looking at the current situations, if you talk about 40-50 years back, we always have to look for the usual scenario. But now we are very uncertain. If you talk about COVID-19 pandemic, we never thought about it. But now the new reports, new contract documents, new construction projects would definitely consider this. So this is a very correct time to consider the worst case scenario over the very usual sort of scenario. Like the same way we go for high flood levels when we design a reservoir or when we design a flyover. So why can't we consider those things when we are designing a smaller aspects like a drainage line or a water supply line? So I think we have to change the scenario we have been looking for. So I think we have to go with the worst case scenario.
And one more thing is, we have seen in Chennai floods, we have seen in Kerala floods. What is happening is the conversion of agricultural land to non-agricultural land. This thing is happening a lot because it's not in Kerala itself; it's happening in the whole country. When development is coming, we don't have land to develop basically. So what we are doing is we are converting our agricultural land to non-agriculture, and we are constructing upon it. The natural flow of river which is coming, it is obstructed, and it don't have a path to go to ocean. So when there is no path for it, definitely it will take away whatever things what you have constructed over its path. This thing has happened in most of the cities, when most of the flooded cities in India.
Yes, correct, Gokul. So now I want to highlight one important thing. When it comes to disaster preparedness, uh, you Keralians are very good at this. Like I've seen uh, last year also, like during the floods, we gathered all essential products, even from Pune, and we send in huge numbers. Even during the plane crash, I hope such incidents never happen ever again. But even during that plane crash, I read the news that many people were standing in line the entire night just to donate bloods to the people who required it. So, what is your take on that? Like, should each and every citizen of India should take such measures to like help our country?
True, PD. What you have heard is absolutely correct. We have faced a lot of situations. First it was 2018 floods. Then in 2019 there was also floods. Then in 2019 itself there was Nipah virus situation. So in every situation, the volunteers of our state, they have stood up to their expectation, and they have done a lot for the people who are suffering. And I'll say hats off to them, because as you have told, this Malappuram Karipur airport incident happened. People were standing in queue to donate blood even at after midnight and all. So it's their dedication. It's their dedication. Now it's, I believe that it's in their blood that some situation is going to happen, and they are the warriors, and they have to carry out all the rescue works and all. So hats off to them.
Correct. So, Krishna, when we look at the image from the plane crash, it was a very sad moment for all of us. Me and Gokul were discussing that there was some issue with the lighting, and after a day, the report was published that they were working on it, and there were some allegations in the past as well. So, what is your take on that? What could have been done?
The peculiarity of the airport at Karipur is that obviously you guys must know by now that it is a tabletop runway, right? So actually, I
Yes,
guess
yes.
it was somewhere around 10 years back. We had a similar accident back in Mangalore airport. That was also a tabletop runway, and flight had shoot past the runway and fell down, and a big disaster happened. So it was at that time there was a report saying that even Karipur was at risk of some accident of that sort, and there were some remedial measures that were suggested. But the issue is that on implementing that remedial measures, you would be facing some maintenance cost on an yearly basis, and they ruled out that because that was not feasible from a financial standpoint. But ultimately, we had to pay the price for that with human lives. I guess there was need for some very proactive measures to avoid the incident in the first place. So coming to the question on the lighting system at the airport, I guess we might not be the expert to comment on that, because see, we don't know what happened there at that night, right? So I guess I'll leave that question unanswered.
Yes, true, Krishna. So, I think we still have to wait for the reports and then we can talk about it. So, I have a very funny story now to say. Uh, back in 2001, we experienced a earthquake in Gujarat. It was a 26th Jan, so I was at home sleeping in my bed, and I had this habit of like falling from my bed. So it was a of 6.9 Richter scale. So like
Mhm.
the first shock was very massive. I fell from my bed, and then I was like, oh, this is nothing. This is very obvious with me. So I again jumped onto my bed, and then something fall from my like right side wall. Then like entire family ran out of the home, and that that incident was very massive. So one very great thing learned by Gujarat was we after 2001 incident we started building our high rise which is resistant to the earthquake. So every time why we need a disaster or why we need some very setback to start looking at a positive side. See, earthquake was not something like which cannot be predicted or which cannot be entirely not considered. So why we still had to wait till 2001 to like start implementing it? That is a big question over here.
PD, I also have a similar story which I have witnessed. I have also witnessed an earthquake in my childhood days. It
Don't
was
say even you fell from the bed,
no, I won't say the same story, but I have a different story. So it was in 2005, the Jammu and Kashmir earthquake. My father was in army and he was posted in Jammu. We also went with him there. So one morning, around 10, I guess, I was doing some work. It was a holiday. My mother was in kitchen. Some initial tremors happened, but I didn't get it basically. But my mother, she heard some voices or some of the utensils falling from the slab or something. When we see that initial tremors, we are not able to recognize it whether it's an earthquake or not. But later on, but after that, two three utensils fall. Then she rushed with us, like me and my sister were there. My father was not there because he was on duty. She took both of us and we went to an open ground. So it was a really panic situation. All of them came out and they were praying, like praying to God that just save us from this situation. After some time, the tremors were cooled down. The epicenter was not near our place. That's why we were saved. Otherwise, the building would have fallen. The whole night we slept outside our houses that day. It was that tragic. We were too much scared of that after that earthquake.
That is very scary. Earthquakes are always scary. So when we are talking of natural earthquakes, how can we miss about the artificial earthquakes? I think Krishna already got a cue about Lebanon. I'm talking about Lebanon. It's a massive strike they recently witnessed. The entire world has been shocked with the event. So
Yes, PD. I still remember when the first video of those explosions coming out. I actually thought it was some kind of a terrorist attack, but then it was later found that they were storing huge amount of chemicals, that too in hugely populated areas. And we know what happened later on there, right? There was huge amount of destruction. People, their lives have been affected. Thousands of people injured. Lot of people dead. Buildings, homes, businesses, all shattered. But why did it happen in the first place? That is a question. See, the authorities that are concerned with this, they already knew that, because those chemicals, thousands of tons of chemicals were sitting there for past 6 7 years. So it was like a disaster waiting to happen, but yet they did not take an action. They could have done something to dispose those chemical, or at least move them to a less populated area. Why do you think something like that sat there for years, PD?
See, I still can't process that there were more than 2,600 tons of ammonia nitrate in a warehouse stored on a port. So, like, I was just looking for the analogies to correlate with the engineering sector. The amount of ammonia nitrate stored over there, if it blast, it could have like accounted somewhere around 33 cubic meter of hard rock breaking. That is the amount of ammonia nitrate was stored there. It could have break 33 cubic meter of rock. So that's a massive thing. And if you look at the story, the shipment was stored at the port back in 2013, I guess, by one of the Russian shipyard. So the story is very interesting actually. The initial shipment, the owner of the shipment got bankrupt, and then it was stranded at the port. Then the port decided to took care of it because it is a like huge explosive substance. So they keep it at the warehouse, one of the warehouse, and it was there since then. So after that, they could have taken some measures because it was like very close to the city area. So what went wrong? I think we still have to look at it, but it was there since 2013. That is one of the very like surprising element over here, and
PD, what?
even more surprising.
Yeah, PD. But what scares me even more is that the people living around that port had no idea that something like that was there, right? So what scares me?
I think they would be aware of it because it was there since 2013, and I think even there were some allegations on the shipments,
No,
like
but
the
see,
people.
from the administrative standpoint, it is true that some people might be aware of what is happening. But I'm saying
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the normal
Common people.
residents, common
Yeah.
people. They might not be aware of something like that on such a huge scale being stored there, right? So what scares me is that, see, I don't know if there is something like that that is stored near my house, like say 5 10 kilometers from me. So is there something that can be done regarding that?
See, if you talk about disaster response, what government of Hyderabad is currently doing, it's a beautiful job. After this incident, they directly took the decision to shift some of the ammonia nitrate to Chennai with a small like package in a container of 10. So I think that could be one of the way of dealing with the problem. So I was referring to few of the articles for today's discussion, and I came across this one article from the chemical professor from US. She was discussing about the importance of ammonium nitrate, and she quoted like this that we wouldn't have this modern world without explosives because we are using it for breaking the rocks to make tunnels, or we are using it as a fertilizer. That's the biggest advantage we have encountered in the farming industry. So it is very difficult to live without ammonium nitrate, but it is always good to put a good amount of attention towards it and how we can take care of such a explosive material. So I think that is the broken point which the government couldn't took care of, and that's why we are witnessing this. That the entire government has resigned. So
PD,
that
but
is very
the
surprising.
see, the current example about Lebanon, we are speaking about ammonium nitrate, but that is just an example, right? Because see, at the Union Carbide factory, it was methyl isocyanate, and at the Vizag plant, it was another chemical. So it is
Hmm.
not about pinpointing a specific chemical and just bringing out a framework for that, but I guess we have to have a entire framework for how we treat all these chemicals, or how these industrial areas are being set up at residential places, or like next to residential areas. What is your take on that? Because it is never about a single element or a single chemical, right?
True, Krishna. See, in usual conditions, when you are dealing with such explosive elements or materials, you have to be very sure when you are taking it around the residential area. There is a set amount of guidelines, there is set amount of procedures that you need to follow. So when you are doing a tunneling work, if you talk about a tunneling work, basically, you have to clear the nearby area, at least 50-meter radius in the area you're working. So, but that is a very small amount we are talking about. It is not even 1 ton of ammonia nitrate. This was massive, more than 2,600. So I don't think we have any guideline for this thing. You have to segregate it. You have to distribute it. You have to come to a conclusion. I'm very sure that the shipment was not supposed to halt at Lebanon's land. It was supposed to go somewhere else. But they encountered the situation. What took them more than 5 years to take a decision, and
But
it has cost lives of many.
yeah, but PD, I believe there are safety norms for storing of ammonium nitrate because it's a deadly explosive. For any incident to happen, like it's a fire to happen, there should be two things: a fuel and an initiator. So the fuel was stored, which was 6 to 7 years in the port, and the initiator, which came in the form of firecrackers, right? So before happening of this type of disaster, it's not a single day event or it's not a single day effect. I believe it will give you symptoms like what our RCC slabs give us, right? It will start with a small crack, then after that there will be coming out of plaster, then reinforcement will corrode, then the whole thing will come down. So it will give you symptoms. If we neglect that symptoms, so we are the one, or not we, not the person who handles that, but the person who are living around that thing will also get affected. The same thing happened with Bhopal also, as Krishna mentioned, the same thing, that methyl isocyanate, the gas, that thing happened in the same way because it also gave some early symptoms. There was leak when the people were checking, or the cleaning staff were cleaning at the night, but they did not notice that much because they thought it's just a common phenomenon, they can mend it tomorrow, the next day. But what happened was, at the night at 12, the pressure rise up, the temperature rise up, and this gas suddenly it got leaked from the whole Union Carbide factory. So the people who were sleeping around that factory, they were innocent, they were not knowing about all these things. The people who were there in the Union Carbide factory, they tried to control that explosion and they tried to pour water on that, but they were not successful in that, and they did not inform the fire safety department till their failure attempts. So after 2:30 only they started informing the fire safety department or other authorities, and they that rang that final siren for the people at 2:30. But at that time it was too much, it flown to people and the people were losing their life there itself. So it has caused a great disaster in Bhopal.
I agree with you, Gokul, but this part of the story is more from the disaster response. But when you talk of preparedness, I think somewhere the owner of the Bhopal this thing factory was like responsible for the event. He was like about to file a bankruptcy. He was about to run out from the business, so he started cutting employees for doing the work. He started playing around with the political games. Like he wanted to create some sort of scene with the factory just to set an example in front of government and ask them to like put some money in the business back. So I think because of the lack of employees and even because of the lack of checklist they were following, I think it was more of a irresponsive behavior from the employees, and the entire incident occurred. So it was not only because of the some failure from the machine part, but it was also from the man-made aspects as well. So what is your take on that, Gokul? Do you agree with me?
Yes, PD, I agree with you because I told you about the early warnings which the system gave to the company. So
True, true.
there were leaks, but the management itself was not ready to clear all those problems. What happened on that night was when the workers was trying to implement that safety norms. There were three safety systems to block that leakage of the gas, but all the three failed. So, but how can we believe that? See, all the three systems failed. It's just pure management from the management side. It's true. It's true that what you had said.
So, PD, let's take a fresh perspective on preparedness, especially during times of disaster. All the discussions that we had were around basically from a common man's perspective, what is happening to him, how can he be prepared. Let's take the construction industry. See, because even when floods happened in Kerala, there were a lot of construction projects that were going on and were affected badly due to the flood. PD, how do you think a project or a company can prepare itself for an impending disaster?
See, when you talk about construction projects, gladly we have this safety department to take care of all these drills. So I'll take one example to highlight some of the issues. During our intensive days back in Ahmedabad, I was working with the Metro Rail project. So we are witnessing cyclone. I think back in June 2019, it was Cyclone Vayu. They named it as a Vayu. So, as part of preparedness, my project site was working in the soft area that is in the tunnel works, and there were some on ground works as well. So, on the ground surface, there were big cranes working on the site, and under the ground, there were tunnel boring machines working. So, they prepared a 3 days plan for the preparedness. So, in that aspect, they lowered all the equipment which was about 3 to 4 meters. They tied it up. They ensured that everything is rigid and firm, that nothing can be harmed. They asked all the operators to rest in the labor colony, make sure that they are taking care of their families and friends. Even they set the entire operation in the tunnel section. So the guidelines were very clear from the safety department. That's how they were able to cope up to the entire situation. Luckily, there were no effects of Vayu at the particular location. I would say the entire Ahmedabad was very safe. There were few distribution on the southern part of Gujarat, but this is one of the aspects to look at. So, like we have studied this thing, PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, and act. So, for disaster preparedness, we can also look at this thing as well. So, see, we can always predict that something is going to happen. We cannot predict the exact thing, but we always have past data to cope up to the other thing. So one thing which I learned from this project is, if you are going to witness some event like cyclone, you always first take care of the assets you have with you, your equipments and your employees. So they took care of both of them. They try to avoid all major activities going to happen within the 3 days of time. So I think this is one very important step any construction site can take, and rest is just like how the nature would take care of us.
PD, it is true that the specific company took care of what needed to be taken care of. But these incidents of cranes falling down are becoming a frequent news, right? So how do you think something like a crane accident could have been avoided at that place? See, dismantling and keeping them on site during the risky days is an option. But do you think companies are willing to do that?
That's again a very political question. But see, when you talk about such events, I think we discussed this in our episode 2 when we were talking about technology. There are some simulating tools nowadays available in the market. I think those packages is a bliss for any company. You can actually visualize the scenario. Even if you say, okay, today I have wind speed which is higher than the usual speed experienced in a particular location, you can simulate the data. You can try to understand the way the uh, original tower crane would respond in such weather conditions. So I think those kind of simulation tools like cyber physical system, or if you talk about, so it is very important to assess like what is the uh, impact on your project. Once you have assessed it, you evaluate how you can reduce the impact. What is the most affected parameters? Like if you have your equipments like tower cranes or heavy crawler cranes roaming around, or if you have tunnel boring machine and you are about to witness a heavy earthquake, you have to always take care of those things. Second biggest asset is your employees. So you take care of them, you ask them to take safety precautions, move on to this safer places, avoid coming to work for a day or two, and you also keep a contingency fund for such events. It's not like that today something happened on my project and I'm running out of the entire cash which I've allocated to the project. So it has to be on a very guided path. So it is like plan, do, check, and act. That's all from my side.
Google, do
Gokul,
you have anything to add regarding the disaster management aspect, especially for construction projects?
So if we talk about construction industry and the disaster management, the first thing which comes in my mind is Murphy's law. That is, anything that can go wrong will definitely go wrong. So it applies to a construction site also. We have to be prepared for everything or every situation. Otherwise, it will affect your business as well as your valuable employees. I believe that there should be a team which should be responsible for preparation of plans regarding the disaster management. There should be a checklist, that is preparedness checklist, that what all things have to be done if something happens. And you should have to analyze the data first, because when you are going to construct a building or any project on that place, the team should analyze the previous data, whether there was a situation of heavy rainfall or any or is it an earthquake prone area. So all these things have to be analyzed in the planning phase itself. So that will give you an upper hand in terms of risk management. The second thing is you have to train your valuable employees, because they are not prepared for this situation. It's all new for them. So just have a basic idea what all things have to be done, because as PD told here that when he was in internship, all these things happened, and there the employees have managed it in a better way. But in all the construction sites, it's not the situation. So it's one of the important thing which has to be implemented. And there should be mock drills, like if the situation happens and what all things have to be done on site, and what are the assembling point where if an earthquake occurs, where you should assemble, the assembling point it should be specified. So all these things are very much important, I guess.
So, guys, I believe we had a very fruitful discussion. PD definitely started with some of the basic understandings of how disaster management, preparedness, and mitigation, and post-disaster management as well. Then we went on to share our experiences about some of the experiences that we had with Kerala floods, landslides, and cyclone that PD had experienced during his internship days. Then we even shared some examples from a global scale. That was the recent Lebanon explosion, then the Mauritius oil spill. Then we came back to the construction industry. We were discussing about the impact of disasters and the need for disaster management and preparedness, especially for construction projects. And again, we had some very interesting examples related to tower cranes and other equipments and even employees. I guess we had a fruitful discussion, and we'll be calling it a day today. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Conversations with Reinforced Engineers podcast. Hope you found value in the discussion and do tune in for next episodes. And in case if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for updates on future episodes. Thank you once again and have a great day.